for exercise 9-3, again, I've gone ahead and drawn the object that we have right here. And the first thing that I need to do is switch over to my layout tab where I've got my template. I'm going to type MV enter to make my viewport. Click on the border of the viewport, change its layer to the viewport layer. Come down here, change the scale to 1:1, and then hit escape to clear the selection of the viewport layer. And for this one, just like I've done with the previous ones, I'm going to go through and switch to my dimension layer and create all of my dimensions to start with. So we've got my overall height dimension right here. We've got this dimension here. And this one is in inches, unlike the other ones which were in metric so far. So we've got our 2.75, the 3.625, the height to this object right here, the distance of this, and then the other two dimensions are my angular dimensions, in which case I'm probably going to need to move this 2.25 out just a little bit so that I can fit everything in here. And we will add this dimension, which is going to be the 45, and then my angular dimension for this, which is 46. So that appears to be all the dimensions that are necessary for this particular object. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and start applying my tolerances. I'm going to hit PR Enter to bring up my properties dialog. And again, if your properties dialog comes up somewhere in the middle, if you just grab this left edge, you can right click and drag it and dock it on the left side of your screen, or sorry, the right side of your screen over here, or the left side of your screen. I prefer to dock mine on the left side of the screen. So dimension number 1 says that it has a plus or minus 0.1. So I'll click on the 3. Tolerance is going to be symmetrical, and in this case the tolerance is 0.1. Now this changed all of this to suppressing the trailing zeros, or it added the 4 decimal places for the precision. The precision that I need in this particular object is really based off of the dimensions that I have. So for this particular one, I really only need the 2 decimal places, so I can change that to be the 2 decimal places. And just for consistency's sake, I've got this 3 right here that doesn't have any decimals after it whatsoever. So I'm going to go to the primary units tab, and under here where we've got suppressed trailing zeros, I'm going to change this to no, and then change my precision here to be the 2 decimal places as well. Now that's a little bit more consistent with everything else that happens to be on my screen. So now I can go to my match properties, and everything else that shares that 0.1 tolerance, which is just really that and dimension 2. So that's this one and this one. So I now have that plus or minus, actually dimension 2 is plus or minus 0.01. So I can click on this and then just come down here and change this to 0.01. And it doesn't look like anything really shares that plus or minus 0.1. But dimension 6, which is this dimension right here, does share this plus or minus 0.01. So I can go to match properties, select this one, and click right here. Now the problem with doing that is it changes this to 2 decimal places here. So I'm just going to go back over here and change my precision for the actual dimension to the 3 decimal places. Once I've got that, I can then go on to dimension number 3, which is my angular dimension of 46.5 to 45.5. And I've put that in at 46 degrees, and so that means it's upper and lower deviations. It's going to be a plus or minus 0.5 degrees, but I'm going to do that using limits instead. So when I click on here for my tolerance display, I want to select limits, and it's going to be 0.5 upper and a 0.5 lower. And in this case, I'm going to need to go back to the primary units and change the angle precision to 2 decimal places so that it actually displays the 46.5 and the 45.5. The next dimension that I want to talk about is dimension number 4, which is this one right here, and has a tolerance of plus or minus 0.005. So when I click on this, I'm going to come down to my tolerance and I'm going to change this to symmetrical, and this is going to be 0.005. And the tolerance precision is just going to be 3 decimal places. So we now have 0.75 plus or minus 0.005. Now I like to, in most cases, keep the tolerance value and the dimension value to have the same number of decimal places. Let me go ahead and move this over here while I'm at it. And to do that, I can just come in here to suppress trailing zeros, change that to no, and change that dimension precision to 3 decimal places. One of the things that you'll find on a lot of drawings is the dimensions often control the tolerances because there's a default tolerance on just about every drawing that's listed on the front sheet. So typically if it's a 3 decimal place, your tolerance is going to be plus or minus 5 thousandths of an inch, which is this. If it's 2 decimal places, then your tolerance may be plus or minus 10 thousandths of an inch. And if it's only 1 decimal place, then your tolerance might be 0.1, plus or minus 0.1. So going in and just changing the number of decimal places that you have in a dimension can often actually change the dimension value. For dimension number 5, which we have right here at 2.75, this is a limit tolerance, and the range that we're given is 2.75 to 2.7. And the reason I drew this in at 2.75 is 0.75 is more of a standard number than a 2.7. So there's really no rule as to how that's going to be drawn in, but doing it at 2.75 just seemed to be a little bit easier for me. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to change my tolerance display to limits. And my lower limit in this particular case is 0.05. So that gives me my 2.75 to my 2.70. And the tolerance precision only needs to be 2 decimal places. And that's going to give me dimension 5. Dimension 6 already has the tolerance applied. Dimension 7 is this one right here, and it is going to have a symmetrical tolerance to 0.5. And notice that it comes in here and says 1. So I want my tolerance precision to be just the 1 decimal place. But in this case, I'm probably going to need to change my angle precision also to 1 decimal place. That way that it shows up as the 0.5 and doesn't actually round it off. And the last dimension that I have is dimension number 8, which is this one right here. But this dimension also has the 0.005 that this one had. So I can use match properties, click on this dimension, and then click on this dimension, and it will inherit all the properties from that one. So we've gone through, we've dimensioned exercise 9-3 in accordance with the book, and then we've applied each one of the tolerances just using our properties dialog box. There's no other fancy things that we have to do to just apply dimensional tolerances to our drawings.